Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on why Fallout's America has not recovered 200 years after the Great War. The Great War's total destruction. On October 23, 2077, the United States and China engaged in a 2-hour nuclear exchange that permanently altered the planet's ability to support human civilization. Strategic nuclear warheads ranging from 200 to 750 kilotons were deployed across major population centers. To put that in perspective, a single 200 kiloton ground burst could obliterate 22 miles of flat terrain. Pennsylvania and New York were hit first at 9:42 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The West Coast followed 5 minutes later. Washington, D.C., being the nation's capital and therefore a priority target for anyone with a grudge, was hit the hardest and went offline almost immediately. The bombs didn't just destroy buildings, they kicked tons of soil and debris into the atmosphere, creating a nuclear winter that enveloped the planet. China also deployed chemical weapons, which combined with the radioactive fallout to create a climate fundamentally incompatible with pre-war life. Traditional crops couldn't grow. Normal animals couldn't survive. The entire ecosystem was rewritten in approximately 120 minutes. Now, 200 years later, those same cities remain irradiated ruins with collapsed infrastructure. There are no power plants to restore, no water treatment facilities to repair, no hospitals, farms, or supply chains to restart. You can't rebuild civilization when the civilization you're trying to rebuild was vaporized into radioactive dust. It's like trying to rebuild a house when the house is ash. Voltec's marketing materials cheerfully suggested people could just walk out after 20 years and restart America, which shows a breathtaking lack of understanding about what multiple hundreds of nuclear warheads do to a continent. But let's say you survived the blast. Congratulations. Now the environment itself wants you dead. Persistent radiation and mutations. The United States military assured personnel that radiation levels would drop to survivable ranges within 2 to 4 weeks after nuclear detonation. This was catastrophically incorrect. Lethal radiation persisted for months in most areas, and 200 years later, background radiation still saturates the wasteland. The planet literally glows in the dark, and you're wondering why farming is difficult. Extended radiation exposure transforms humans into ghouls, individuals with rotting flesh who are technically immortal but look like they've been marinating in a nuclear reactor. Prolonged radiation to the brain creates feral ghouls who lose all capacity for reason and attack anything that moves. Mutated creatures now dominate the ecosystem. Rad scorpions the size of cars. Deathclaws, which are 10-foot-tall murder lizards, genetically engineered by the pre-war military, because apparently regular war wasn't deadly enough. Mirelurks, yaoguai, bloodbugs, and approximately 47 other things that will kill you. Plant life mutated as well. Razor grain, tato, and mut fruit are edible, assuming you enjoy crops that taste vaguely radioactive. Most other vegetation is either poisonous or actively hostile. The glowing sea in the Commonwealth still emits lethal radiation centuries after the blast, serving as a permanent reminder that some areas will never be habitable again. Water sources require constant purification because the rain itself is contaminated. Radiation storms continue to occur, spreading fresh contamination across previously cleaned areas. Even settlements in relatively safe zones experience background radiation that affects long-term health and fertility. You cannot establish organized agriculture when the soil is poisoned. You cannot build cities when the environment creates evolutionary pressure for pure survival mode only. Expecting normal life when the rain is radioactive is the kind of optimism that gets you killed in approximately 48 hours. And if the radioactive wasteland doesn't kill you, the things living in it definitely will. Extreme resource scarcity. The resource wars that caused the Great War in the first place were fought over petroleum and uranium shortages. Food riots erupted across America in October 2077, weeks before the bombs even fell. So naturally, the post-war situation is exponentially worse. You can't build a society when everyone's fighting over 200-year-old canned beans. After 2 centuries of scavenging, most pre-war supplies are exhausted. Every shelf has been picked clean. Every warehouse has been stripped. Every bunker has been looted at least 4 times. Agriculture is nearly impossible due to contaminated soil, mutated pests that eat crops faster than humans can grow them, and a complete absence of fertilizer or proper seeds. Clean water requires extensive purification systems. Project Purity in the Capital Wasteland was a massive technological undertaking just to provide drinkable water to one region, and even that required a GECK, which is essentially a terraforming miracle device that most settlements don't have. Medicine is incredibly rare. medical knowledge was lost when the doctors died. There's no manufacturing base to produce new goods, meaning if something breaks, you either scavenge a replacement or learn to live without it. Brahman, the mutated two-headed cattle, provide food and transportation, but their breeding rates are limited, and they're not exactly winning any agricultural efficiency awards. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, humans require food and water before they can even think about safety, belonging, or self-actualization. The wasteland is permanently stuck at the bottom tier. Every day is survival. There is no surplus for building civilization. You cannot start a business when you're starving. Vault dwellers who emerge expecting to farm are shocked to discover there are no seeds, no tools, and no fertile land. Just dust, radiation, and regret. So you're starving, irradiated, and barely surviving. Perfect time for 8-foot-tall murder monsters to show up. The FEV and super mutants. The forced evolutionary virus was a pre-war military project designed to create super soldiers. Congratulations, the military created unkillable monsters before the war. They're still here. Multiple facilities developed FEV strains, including West Tech in California, Mariposa Military Base, and Vault 87 in the Capitol Wasteland. After the bombs fell, these samples didn't just sit there collecting dust. They got used. In 2102, a man named Richard Gray fell into an FEV vat at Mariposa and mutated into something that could charitably be described as a sentient tumor. He called himself the Master and decided the best way to save humanity was to dip thousands of people into the same virus that turned him into an eldritch horror. He created Unity, an army of super mutants standing over 8 feet tall, immune to radiation, incredibly strong, and mostly sterile. The sterility part is important because it means they can't reproduce naturally, so they compensate by kidnapping humans and forcibly transforming them. Every human captured equals one more super mutant. It's an exponential problem. 200 years later, super mutants remain a perpetual threat across multiple regions. The Master's Army in the West, Vault 87 strain in the East. The Institute in the Commonwealth deliberately created super mutants through FEV experiments and then released them into the wasteland as failed experiments, which is a polite way of saying they dumped their biological weapons onto civilians. The Enclave even tried weaponizing modified FEV for genocide with FEV Curling 13. Super mutants don't need food or water. They're radiation immune. They're the perfect wasteland predator. Humans need resources to survive. Super mutants just need to exist. You cannot establish safe trade routes when 8-foot-tall green monsters keep kidnapping your caravans. It's pest control, but the pests are bulletproof, and they've been trying to exterminate them for 200 years. At least super mutants you can see coming. Next up, an infectious plague that turns you into a monster. The Scorched Plague. 200 years wasn't enough suffering, so the planet invented a new plague. The Scorched Plague emerged in Appalachia sometime around the Great War, spread by creatures called scorch beasts that came crawling out of underground fissures. These flying bat monsters carried an ultracite-based mutagenic infection that transformed humans into scorched and zombie-like creatures with crystalline growths erupting from their bodies. The Scorched operated as a hive mind, attacking all non-infected on site and spreading the disease through contact. Between 2077 and 2010-2, the Scorched Plague systematically wiped out every organized faction in Appalachia. The Responders, who were trying to help people, the Firebreakers, who were emergency services personnel, the Free States, who were paranoid survivalists, specifically prepared for apocalyptic scenarios, and the Appalachian Brotherhood of Steel, an elite military force with power armor and heavy weapons. All of them gone, wiped out by bat monsters. Elder Roger Maxson, leader of the Brotherhood of Steel, forbade his Appalachian chapter from using nuclear weapons against the Scorch Beasts because he found the idea of using nukes morally abhorrent. Truly inspiring moral high ground. Everyone died anyway. The Scorched Plague made the entire region uninhabitable during the active outbreak, creating expanding dead zones as Scorch Beasts spread the infection across Appalachia. There was no cure for decades until Vault 76 dwellers finally developed one post-2102. You're recovering from nuclear war, trying to rebuild civilization, and then a zombification plague shows up. The Scorched Plague is proof that new existential threats continue emerging even 200 years after the bombs fell. Radiation is not the only problem. There are diseases too. The wasteland is nature's middle finger to recovery efforts, constantly generating fresh nightmares to ensure humanity stays miserable. Even without plagues and mutants, humanity would destroy itself anyway. They're very good at it. Raiders and lawlessness. Turns out when there's no police, people just murder each other. Shocking. With no functioning government and no law enforcement, organized gangs emerged who realized theft was easier than farming. These raiders steal, murder, and enslave rather than build, creating a parasitic economy that feeds off the few survivors trying to rebuild. Multiple raider factions control key locations across the wasteland. The Khans, Vipers, Jackals, Fiends, Disciples, Pack, and Operators all operate under the same basic principle. Why grow crops for one season when you can steal 200 years' worth of other people's efforts? They block trade routes, preventing economic recovery. They siege settlements, making safe travel impossible. The Pit, an entire city, was controlled by raiders who ran slave labor operations. Nuka World, a massive amusement park, was taken over by 3 raider gangs who turned it into a fortress. Every time someone tries farming, raiders burn it down. Every time a settlement establishes trade, raiders rob the caravans. It's the prisoner's dilemma on a societal scale. Cooperation is the best strategy for everyone, but individually, violence is easier and more immediately profitable. You cannot establish economic recovery when armed gangs constantly destroy any surplus. It's like trying to build a sandcastle while someone kicks it over repeatedly. Why don't they work together? Because bullets are easier than trust. Farming requires seeds, tools, fertile land, months of labor, and constant defense against mutants and radiation. Raiding requires guns and a complete absence of morality. One requires cooperation and delayed gratification. The other requires pointing a weapon at someone weaker than you. For 200 years, humans have chosen violence because it's the path of least resistance. And when people do try to organize, they can't agree on who's in charge. Lack of unified leadership. Everyone agrees society needs rebuilding. Nobody agrees on who should do it. The pre-war United States government was completely destroyed with no continuity, leaving multiple competing factions that are individually too weak to unify the wasteland, but collectively strong enough to prevent anyone else from doing so. The New California Republic is the most successful post-war government, which is impressive until you realize they immediately recreated every problem that caused the Great War in the first place. Corruption, imperialism, overextension, conscription, and the Bitter Springs Massacre, where NCR troops slaughtered Khan women, children, and elderly because their intelligence was catastrophically wrong. They formed a government and then speed ran, becoming the thing they replaced. The Brotherhood of Steel hoards technology to prevent its misuse, which they accomplish by not using it themselves. Their strategy for saving humanity involves hiding in bunkers and shooting anyone who touches pre-war equipment. Extremely helpful, settlements remain isolated because there's no shared currency beyond bottle caps, which aren't even universal. Each region develops separately with no central authority to coordinate defense or trade. Factions spend more time fighting each other than cooperating. NCR versus Brotherhood of Steel. Brotherhood versus Enclave. Everyone versus Raiders. It's a group project where everyone wants to be leader and nothing gets done. Success in California doesn't spread to the Capital Wasteland or the Commonwealth because each region is too busy dealing with its own catastrophes to help anyone else. 200 years and they're still arguing about governance like it's a Reddit thread. Tribalism and factional identity prevent unity. You cannot rebuild civilization when the people who could rebuild civilization are too busy fighting over who gets to be in charge. Of course, organizing is much harder when your neighbors are actually undercover experiments in suffering. Vault-Tec's social experiments. Vault-Tec built 122 underground bunkers and marketed them as humanity's salvation. Only 17 were control vaults that functioned as advertised. The remaining 105 were cruel social and scientific experiments conducted on sealed populations who believed they were being saved. Vault-Tec. We saved humanity. Also, we tortured them for science. Vault 11 forced residents to sacrifice one person annually, or the life support would shut down, weaponizing democracy itself. The test was to see how long it took them to refuse. It took generations. Vault 75 separated children from their parents, executed the elderly immediately, and ran a eugenics program breeding genetically superior specimens. Vault 81 had scientists secretly pumping diseases into the population to test experimental cures. Vault 87 conducted FEV experiments that created the super mutants plaguing the Capital Wasteland. Vault 106 pumped psychoactive drugs through the ventilation system until inhabitants went violently insane. Vault 112 trapped residents in virtual reality pods where Dr. Braun spent 200 years torturing them repeatedly for entertainment because he was bored. Survivors who eventually emerged were traumatized, distrustful, and sometimes more dangerous than the wasteland itself. Vault 15 dwellers became 3 raider tribes, the Khans, Jackals, and Vipers. The most successful Vault survivors immediately became raiders. Truly inspiring. Marketing promised salvation. Reality delivered psychological torture disguised as social science. It's a refugee shelter that's actually a torture dungeon. Vault-Tec preserved humanity by destroying everything human about them. The populations they saved often caused more harm than those who took their chances on the surface. Vault 11's solution was right there from the beginning. Refuse the sacrifice. But it took generations of murder before anyone figured it out. But at least Vault-Tec's evil was passive. Some factions actively sabotaged recovery. The Enclave's sabotage. The Enclave are remnants of the pre-war United States government who spent 200 years in bunkers convincing themselves they are the only pure humans left. Their solution to rebuilding America: kill everyone who survived the apocalypse. We'll save humanity by killing everyone who survived the apocalypse. Truly visionary leadership. The Enclave consider all wastelanders to be mutants unworthy of life due to radiation exposure. By their logic, anyone exposed to background radiation qualifies for extermination, which would be approximately 99% of the remaining human population. They attempted genocide multiple times using modified FEV strains. FEV Curling 13 was designed specifically as a biological weapon with a 99.5% fatality rate against mutated humans. Their plan was to release it into the atmosphere via jet streams, achieving global extinction. Its firefighters solving fires with more fire. In the capital wasteland, the Enclave tried poisoning Project Purity, a facility literally designed to provide clean drinking water to survivors. Someone was trying to help people, and the Enclave's response was bioweapon contamination. They forced slaves to excavate Mariposa military base for FEV samples, and those slaves died from exposure to the virus. They created Frank Horrigan, an enhanced super mutant super soldier, by subjecting him to modified FEV and cybernetic augmentation. Horrigan could tear a Deathclaw in half with his bare hands, which is impressive until you remember he was working for the faction trying to commit genocide. The Enclave was defeated by the Chosen One in 2242 and the Lone Wanderer in 2277, but nearly succeeded both times. Resources spent fighting the Enclave could have gone toward rebuilding. Their experiments created additional super mutants. Their interference set back recovery efforts by decades. Pure humanity equals people in a bunker who never helped anyone. And if you think the Enclave was bad, wait until you meet the Institute. The Institute's interference. The Commonwealth Institute of Technology survived the Great War by retreating underground, where they spent 200 years developing the most advanced technology in the wasteland. We have the technology to save everyone. We're using it to make robots and kidnap people. The Institute created synths, synthetic humans indistinguishable from real people, which they used for infiltration and espionage. They kidnapped surface dwellers for FEV experiments, creating super mutants in the process. When those experiments failed, they released the super mutants into the Commonwealth as discarded byproducts. Science for the betterment of mankind equals creating murder monsters and dumping them on civilians. They replaced settlers with synth copies to spy on surface communities, creating mass paranoia where nobody could trust their neighbors. When the Commonwealth tried forming a unified government at a diplomatic summit, the Institute responded with the CPG massacre, murdering everyone in attendance. The Commonwealth tried organizing. The Institute said no. They created Kellogg, a cybernetically enhanced mercenary who doesn't age, and sent him to kidnap an infant from Vault 111 for genetic experiments. The Institute possesses molecular relay technology, Gen 3 synths, advanced robotics, and scientific knowledge that could rebuild civilization. They refuse to share any of it. Their facility is only accessible via teleportation, ensuring complete isolation from surface problems. It's a billionaire with the cure for disease using it to run cruel experiments instead of helping anyone. For 200 years, they perfected technology underground and use it to actively sabotage any attempt at Commonwealth unity. They successfully isolated themselves from wasteland problems by being the wasteland problem. In conclusion, America hasn't recovered because the bombs destroyed the foundation. The radiation poisoned the earth, resources vanished. Mutants hunted survivors. Plagues emerged. Raiders killed settlers. Factions fought each other. Vault Tech tortured vault dwellers. The Enclave tried genocide, and the Institute sabotaged unity. Basically, recovery requires cooperation, resources, and peace. The Wasteland has none of these things and actively generates new problems. And you should absolutely play the Fallout games to see this cheerful world yourself. If you enjoyed this PowerPoint presentation, I made others, and you should absolutely check them out. Peace on planet Earth.